Vladimir Putin outsmarted himself on the Ukraine, and that's why he's pulling his troops back from the border, if he's doing it. We haven't seen confirmation yet, but if he is, I want to talk a little bit about why he is. He got himself into a really weird situation. He said that on this coming weekend, on May 12th, there would be a referendum in the eastern Ukraine, the area where a lot of Russians live, about breaking away from the Ukraine and joining Russia. So he has to have, if he has the referendum, he could win it or he could lose it. Now he's counting the votes, so he'd probably win it. If he lost it, it would be a repudiation of his claim that he needs to protect ethnic Russians that live in the Ukraine, because they would have voted to stay in the Ukraine. If he wins the referendum, he then has to do something about it. He has to invade. He would have to send troops into the Ukraine. Otherwise, he's leaving his people stranded after they ask to be united with Mother Russia. And invading the Ukraine is no simple matter. It's a country of 45 million people, at least 35 million of whom desperately do not want to be under Russian control. Remember, Germany lost several divisions occupying the Ukraine in World War II because of partisan activity behind the lines. And already encountering the pro-Russian demonstrators occupying buildings in eastern Ukraine, the individual Ukrainian citizens have been taking matters into their own hands, in many cases bringing weapons that they own privately and going after the Russians that are there themselves. And they really are increasing the violence toll. And Putin really has to have the sense that he will have the fight of his life on his hands if he invades Ukraine. The Ukrainian army won't be worth a whole lot, but the Ukrainian people sure will be. And it'll be very difficult for Russia to pull that off, very expensive, and really just destroy Russia's international standing, whatever is left of it. So Putin has backed away from the abyss and said, we're not going to have the referendum, and I'm going to pull my troops back from the border. And I recognize the validity of the May 23rd election that the Ukrainian government has called to decide who should run the Ukraine. They have to do that because they took power in a coup, and now they need to go to an election to actually choose a democratic government. And Putin is saying that he wants to negotiate with Ukraine in the interim, a dialogue he calls it, to set up a federal structure which would give certain self-government rights to the eastern Ukraine. Now, some of them are easy, things like guaranteeing them the ability to speak Russian in public and public documents, kind of like the French-Canadian language controversy. But a lot of it is they want control of the foreign policy to ally with Russia, and Ukraine doesn't want to give it to them. Now, of course, one of the problems is that in eastern Ukraine, there is still a Ukrainian majority. The Russians are still a minority, even in eastern Ukraine. So it's not at all clear how those federated states would function. But the real problem that Putin has is that he's going to be negotiating with the Ukrainian leaders prior to their election. If the Ukrainian leaders make any concessions to Putin, they're going to get defeated in the election because the people are going to vote for the strongest line against Putin they can find. They're not going to go with an administration that they think is giving their country away. So Putin has set himself up for failure in these negotiations. Then when the election is held on May 23rd, that puts him in a worse position. Because if the anti-Russian forces win that election, as they obviously will, but win it with 75 or 80% of the vote, which they well might, it totally belittles Putin's claim about the need to protect the pro-Russian minority. And particularly if in those provinces in the southeast of Ukraine that are heavily Russian, they vote in favor of a Ukrainian hardline government to hold the line against Russia, which they probably will, it removes any excuse that Putin could have for invading the Ukraine. So in a sense, Putin really shot himself in the foot. He proceeded really smoothly when it came to Crimea, but he kind of outthought himself and outsmarted himself in the Ukraine. Thanks for watching.